We're delighted to welcome Professor Eyre, who's going to be speaking with us tonight. She's been with us all day in school, and I would like to professionally introduce her to you. First of all, I ought to say that she has had a 30-year career in education, and her particular area of interest is how children think and how children learn. Obviously, as a parent herself, she has an interest there, but she has worked in this field for a long time and is known as both a researcher and a publisher of this area of education. She's currently the Director of Education with Nord Anglia Education. She's visiting senior researcher, research fellow at the University of Oxford in England. She is an advisor to many universities around the world, including Johns Hopkins in the USA, WITS in South Africa, and the Institute of Education in Hong Kong. At the request of the United Kingdom government, she was the founding director of the National Academy of Gifted and Talented Youth. Indeed, she's an advisor to government ministries in many countries of the world. She's widely published in academic journals, for government think tanks, and practical publications for people in the business of education, including teachers. Indeed, our initial impression of Professor Eyre is she's one of those academics who can also speak in a way that we all understand. So without any further ado, I would like to welcome Professor Deborah Eyre.
Well, thank you, Mike, for those very kind comments, and also just firstly to say just how delightful it is to be here at Regent's in Pattaya. It's an absolute pleasure to have so many of you here tonight, and as Mike said, for you to be giving up your time to come and listen to this. I kind of make no apology that I'm kind of passionate about education, and I've spent a lifetime in working in education, and I can't think of any better place to have a career. Because education is all about our children, who are going to be the next generation, the future. And they come to school so ready to learn, so malleable, and our responsibility is to help them to be the best they can be. So in pursuit of all of that, I've spent quite a lot of my career thinking about, well, how is it that some children learn more easily than others? How do some children get to very high levels of performance? Or indeed, how do adults get to those high levels of cognitive performance? And in a way, the story I'm going to give to you today is about how that happens, and a little bit about how you as parents can help to support all of that. I'm not promising that every one of your children is going to turn into Einstein, but I am saying that as a parent, there's much you can do to support your child and help them to really fulfill their potential and be the best they can be. So my kind of starting point is to say that it is an interesting time for your children to be being educated. In terms of education, the kind of current thinking is that education is probably more important now than it's ever been before. One of the reasons for this is because the kind of jobs that people are doing now are more complex and more difficult than they've ever been in the past. But in the future, those jobs are going to be even more complex. So what we know internationally is that actually a degree level qualification, which when I finished school was quite an unusual thing for someone to do, to go and do a first degree at university, was still only a relatively small percentage. The position that we're now in is that, as you can see, the vast majority of jobs actually require that level of qualification. And as we move into the future and things become increasingly sophisticated, it'll probably be even more. So it's small wonder that people like Alison Wolfe are kind of suggesting that in the great scheme of things, education is more important now than it's ever been. And it's not just any education, it's the right education in the right subjects, the right choice for the child. So suddenly your schooling becomes more important, where you go to university becomes more important. And the research evidence shows that it's not just important in terms of getting a good job, it's also important in terms of predicting your future happiness and general contentment. So the stakes are higher in education. And for many children who go through the education system, and those of you who have older children will know this, the pressure to get good grades at IGCSE and at IB is probably greater now than it's ever been. And in many ways, that can put quite a strain on particular young people, especially those kinds of young people who try really hard and are quite perfectionist. They want to do really well. They want to do as the best that they can, and they're not really happy with second best. So it is a time where understanding how learning works and how to maximise that kind of potential is more important than it's ever been. So I guess what I kind of want to say about this is a kind of good starting point then, is to say, well, if all of that is true, if that is the case, then what does it mean if we say that somebody is a good learner who's going to do well? What kinds of things do they do? And in many ways, I guess it's some of the same things that we've always thought. It's being able to sit the exams, do well in the exams, etc. But actually it's more than that. It's really considerably more than that, because if we look at this kind of slide, these are the characteristics which we know that you need to be able to demonstrate to do really well. So some of those things, thinks for themselves. So it's not good enough just to be able to listen carefully to what your teacher tells you and then repeat it. You have to be able to think about it for yourself. Well, why is that important now in a way that it wasn't important before? Well, it's always been important in terms of getting to advanced levels of cognitive performance, but probably more so now than ever, because often when we're trying to look at things which are coming up in the future, they're kind of unfamiliar things. So we have to solve problems that we don't know are going to exist. So if we're going to prepare our students well, that's what they've got to be able to do. So going back to, I was educated, I'm afraid, a very, very long time ago. And when I was educated, the internet didn't even exist. Whereas today, it's just so much part of our lives, it's difficult to envisage what it was like beforehand. But that ability to think for yourself is really tremendously important. In the same way, a willingness to actually have a go, not be afraid, not be too diffident and frightened about trying new things. Because if you don't try new things, then you really don't know how far you can go. You have to take those kinds of risks. You have to risk getting it wrong. You have to risk looking a little bit silly. I mean, some of your children are just brilliant compared with children in, say, the UK. Because your children are speaking more than one language. Some of them are speaking 2 languages, some even more. And how did they get to do that? Well, they were willing to try things out, sometimes get it wrong, try again. Whereas students in the UK generally are particularly poor at languages. And one of the reasons why they are is because they're kind of uneasy about trying and then being seen to be a little bit silly. So, kind of really trying is important. You have to persevere. It's really no good giving up at the first hurdle. It's been a kind of interesting time for me this summer because I live in the UK and it's been the Olympic Games. And it's been a really special time in the UK. And one of the things that's been most inspiring has been those athletes who didn't give up, who really went, when it was cold and dark, still went out running, or when they really wanted to do something else, were still prepared to practice to get to where they need to be. So these kinds of characteristics are really important now. And school does teach some of this, but school isn't the only place where you can practice these kinds of things. They're the kind of choices that you make when you help your child as a parent. So perseverance, for example, if your child takes up something new, takes up playing a musical instrument, sometimes the first few weeks or months, first couple of months, goes quite well. It's quite interesting, they're quite excited by it, it's quite engaging. And then they get to a point sometimes where they're struggling. It all sounds a bit squeaky, they don't seem to be making much progress, and they want to give up. And that's the moment where you as a parent can help, because overcoming that particular little hump in the road is really important, and not sort of allowing your child to constantly sort of start something and then give up and then start something else and then if that gets hard, give up, is just a critical thing. As a parent, it's not the easiest thing to do, of course. Sometimes, it's just easier to go for the quiet life. I'm a parent, I know. It's just sometimes easier just to say, okay, well, just don't do your piano practice today then. We'll just forget it today. It's just too much trouble. But actually, it's important. So what we really know about, how do people get to perform highly, and I've done over the years lots and lots of research into both young children but also adults who are very successful, people like Nobel Prize winners, other kinds of people. And really you can kind of boil it all down to something relatively simple that looks something like this. So what you need in order to get to high levels of performance, to succeed in school and in later life, is you need a certain amount of potential. In order to do well. You need the right kinds of opportunities to come your way. You need good support, and then you need to be motivated. And what I'm going to do for the next few minutes is to just talk about each of the elements of that formula. There may be some people amongst you in the audience, but I can't see you, so I don't know, who are scientists. If you are a scientist, I have to assure you at this point that my formula is entirely representational. You don't have to divide the opportunities by the support. Those of us who've got a degree in English literature, it just makes a nice picture, okay? So, what I want to sort of start with is this question of potential. So, potential, how far can a child go? Well, it's a really good question, and it's probably the most difficult thing of all for us to know about. I wonder, is it possible for us to have the lights on for just a moment while I do this little next bit? Is that possible? Can you turn the lights on?
Yeah.
Just a moment, everybody. Okay, I need to see you for this. So, here is the question. How intelligent are you? Okay, so 10 is very intelligent, 5 average, and 1 not intelligent at all. Now, don't be shy, okay? Right. Anyone think that they are 10? One at the back. Oh, quite a few. There's a lot of very intelligent people here in Thailand. 9. 8. 7. A lot of 7s. 6. Very few. 5. Never mind. 4. Anyone below 4? Okay. Well, interestingly, the vast majority of you are kind of clustered around 6, 7, 8, with the majority being 7. Okay. Now, what's interesting about that particular piece of information is that you're not unusual. Here's the graph. If we did this with any group of people, this is the most likely outcome. So, is it the case that, that this is accurate? Well, it's difficult to know, isn't it? Because this is all about self-perception. But what we do know is that most people, when they're asked to rank themselves, that's how it falls. That's how they see themselves. So most people think that, they're pretty intelligent, but not right on the top end of the scale. There are some people on the outliers. When I've asked this question once, I got somebody who said that they called out and said, they were definitely beyond 10, which I was kind of a bit taken aback by, but there you go. So I think what we have to kind of recognise there is that we have a kind of self-perception about how good we think we are, let alone what anybody else tells us. And that's a very interesting thing about children, because what you think in terms of how good they are in terms of potential, or what their teachers think, may not exactly be the same as what they think. So an important kind of thing is that some children overestimate their capabilities and some underestimate their capabilities. So some, when you give them something new to do, they always think they're going to be able to do it, even if they really haven't got the skills. Whereas others, it doesn't matter how much you say to them, yeah, of course you're really good at this, they're never quite sure of that themselves. And that even extends into adulthood, that you have people who everybody knows is really good. Everybody knows, except them. Because your self-perception is a different perception from how other people feel. So one of the things as a parent that's really important is to help your child to develop that confidence and self-belief. So, of course you could say, well, you must be able to say, we just estimated how good you might be, but surely you can just measure it. You can take a test. Well, we used to think that was a reliable way of measuring potential. And in the middle of the 20th century, it was really very fashionable. IQ tests particularly were very fashionable. And they're still around, and they're still used. But the fact of the matter is that it's not easy to measure potential. And in fact, we now find it's more difficult than we thought it was. So it's one of those areas where we thought we were getting quite accurate, and now we've discovered it's more complicated than we thought. So the general kind of consensus view is that we won't ever be able to develop a test which will reliably predict eventual adult achievement. And why is that? Well, there are many reasons for this, but really one of the reasons is that it is very hard to know how a child is going to develop. So if we take something like IQ, which everybody thinks, where you can do an IQ test and determine how high an IQ somebody has. So generally speaking, an IQ of 125 is pretty good, 130 is better, 140 is really good. But, it's generally assumed you can sit an IQ test, and if you sit it once, and then you sit it again a year later, you will get the same score. That's what it's supposed to do. But what we've discovered in recent years is that actually that's not the case, because we can improve our IQ. So what has been discovered, and this is all in the area of neuroscience, is that if you undertake certain sorts of training activities, then you do improve your IQ. And improving your IQ, how do we know this? Well, IQ tests have been given to random groups of people, then they've been given particular training activities, and then subsequently those people who've engaged in certain kinds of activities, their IQ score goes up when they do the test a second time. So what is it that you need to do to improve your IQ? Well, I wonder if you can guess. Well, it turns out that these are very helpful things. So a kind of good question is, do you ever do any of these at home with your children? Because if you want to help your children fulfill their potential, they're all quite useful things. Now, I'm not suggesting that you go home and do this tomorrow, but I'm suggesting that it's important to realise that our brain is sufficiently plastic that we can change and improve. So if your child is doing very, very well aged 5, you want to help them continue to do well. But if they're not doing very well aged 5, don't be discouraged, because actually that's just how they're doing aged 5. Aged 7 or 8, they might be doing a whole lot better. Aged 10 and 11, they might be exceeding other children. It's very, very difficult to know. It's not a linear kind of process. Of course, there's some quite interesting things in this list, and especially when I'm talking here in Thailand, this is an interesting list, because this list is really culturally biased. There's certain kinds of activities on this list that happen more in the households of some cultures than others. So they're more highly valued by some cultures than others. And therefore, it's not a surprise to realise that some of these kinds of things which improve your scores on IQ are the kinds of things which are very much a part of Western society, because IQ tests were invented in the West. So IQ tests value the kinds of things that are valued in that particular culture. So all tests are culturally specific and value particular cultural features. And that's an important thing to remember. So really the kind of the view that you're ever going to be able to predict absolutely how well your children are going to do, it's just never going to happen. What you've got to do as a parent and as a school, for teachers sitting in the audience here, is you've got to be open-minded, because what's happening now is just what's happening now. It's not an indicator of what's going to happen later. What's going to happen later will be affected by what I talked about before: opportunities, support, motivation. When I've done research, and other people have also done much bigger studies looking at people who are very successful in adult life, and asked them about their own childhood, what kind of comes out is that even Nobel Prize winners were very rare